Hello, my name is Sean Matthews. I'm going to do a plot summary on the novel by Robert Louis Stevenson, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. To begin with, it starts out with Mr. Utterson and Richard Enfield going on a walk, as they usually do. And Enfield talks about a case of assault by a strange man that runs over a girl on the sidewalk, and then he disappears. And he comes back to pay a man with a check. And since they agree on not to talk about this, the life goes on. And it isn't until Dr. Jekyll has written his will, and it includes Mr. Hyde as the sole acquisitioner of all of his money. And it's pretty crazy. And so Mr. Utterson visits Jekyll and their mutual friend, Dr. Lanyon, to try to learn more about why he would include Mr. Hyde's name on the will. So Lanyon reports that he hasn't seen much of Jekyll, and ever since their dispute over research, that they've never been friends anymore. So Utterson begins to stake out Mr. Hyde and follows him to a building, which is actually a laboratory attached to the back of Dr. Jekyll's house. And then a year passes, and one night a girl witnesses a crazy man, which is Mr. Hyde, beating an old man, which is Sir Danvers Carew, to death. And the police contact Mr. Utterson, and he suspects that it's Mr. Hyde as the murderer. He leads them to Mr. Hyde's apartment, and when they go in, nobody's there, even though the apartment's full of luxury things, which is shocking compared to how ugly and creepy that Mr. Hyde was. And Utterson then visits Jekyll, who has said he ended all of the relations with Mr. Hyde, and he shows him a note, which is Hyde apologizing for the trouble that he's caused him. And then a few months later, Jekyll acts very happy and sociable again, until one night he just stops seeing visitors, and he's locked himself in his laboratory, and nobody knows why. And then when Mr. Utterson's talking to him through his window, he suddenly slams the window shut and won't talk to him anymore. So eventually, he finds out that after Mr. Lanyon has passed away, that he will read the letter once Dr. Jekyll is dead. And it says, after finally going to Dr. Jekyll and opening the door to his laboratory, the letter says how Dr. Jekyll has been creating this potion mixed with salt to turn him into Mr. Hyde. And he's been experiencing this feeling of greatness because he's turned into such a crazy person and let out all his good versus evil. And that is the plot summary of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.